Another 40 billion ringgit of stimulus package announced as total lockdown initiated. Shabu ecstasy weighing over 50 kilos seized after 3 detained. Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. You're watching Updates at Noon with me, Azlani Adani. Malaysia began the phase 1 of the total lockdown initiative today, during which all non-essential activities are prohibited for 2 weeks. As such, Malaysians are reminded to just stay at home and observe the strict SOPs, which can be referred through the National Security Council's web portal. According to the latest Standard Operating Procedures SOP released today, children aged 12 and under are now prohibited from appearing in public except for emergency, medical treatment, education and exercising purposes. In addition to travelling within the 10-kilometre radius or the nearest available service from your home, the capacity of private vehicle will be limited to 2 people from the same household, while for medical purposes, the maximum capacity allowed is only 3 people, including the patient. With the exception of emergency cases such as death or visiting ailing immediate family members, the ban on inter-district and interstate travel remains, and the ban also applies to long-distance married couples. During the lockdown period, 80% of the government staff and 60% of private sector workers are to work from home. However, the public need not fear, as restaurants, food stalls and outlets, laundry services, pet care and food stores, eyewear and optical goods stores, hardware stores, automobile repair and spare part shops, e-commerce as well as wholesale and distribution are allowed to operate. The government has announced a 40 billion ringgit perkembangan plus stimulus package based on 3 main goals to shore up the country's economy and assist the people amid the stricter Movement Control Order (MCO) being implemented to curb the rise in COVID-19 infections. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the 3 main goals are expanding the public health capacity through an allocation of 1 billion ringgit, continuing the Prihatin Rakyat agenda with a 33 billion ringgit allocation, and supporting business continuity with an additional 6 billion ringgit. Among the initiative for the people are Prihatin Rakyat Plus 8, targeted bank loan assistance, wage subsidy program, assistance for bus, taxi and e-hailing drivers, and electricity bill discount.
Kerajaan bersetuju untuk memperuntukkan 2.1 bilion ringgit bagi menambah kadar program bantuan prihatin rakyat atau BPR. Dan bagi kategori isi rumah yang berpendapatan di bawah RM2,500, mereka akan menerima kadar BPR tambahan sebanyak RM500 lagi, dan isi rumah berpendapatan antara RM2,501 hingga RM5,000 akan menerima kadar sebanyak RM300. Golongan bujang pula akan menerima RM100. BPR tambahan ini akan mula dimasukkan ke akaun penerima pada hujung bulan Jun nanti.
For the B40 group and people affected by loss of jobs, as well as micro-enterprises and small and medium enterprises (SMEs) that are not allowed to operate during the MCO 3.0 period, they are given the option to obtain an automatic moratorium approval for 3 months on a reduction in repayment in installments of 50% for a period of 6 months on loan. This initiative will be implemented from June, as expected to benefit more than 5 million borrowers with a value of up to 30 billion ringgit. Bank Negara Malaysia (BNM) will increase the targeted assistance and rehabilitation facility for affected small and medium enterprises (SMEs) by 2 billion ringgit. The Premier said the total loan fund for SMEs still available was 7 billion ringgit. Tan Sri Muhyiddin added that the rate for the Gerakan Khas Prihatin GKP will be increased by RM500 to RM1,500 to ensure business continuity, especially for SMEs in managing their cash flow. This means that almost 1 million SMEs and micro enterprises will receive RM1,000 in mid-June, and another RM500 will be dispersed in July.
Saya juga ingin tegaskan, berdasarkan SOP terbaru yang diumumkan, kerajaan masih membenarkan operasi jual beli peniaga kecil, penjaja jalanan dan termasuklah perusahaan mikro. Oleh itu, sekiranya para peniaga ingin mendapatkan pembiayaan mikrokredit sebagai modal kerja, sebanyak RM1.5 bilion disediakan bagi sepanjang tahun ini oleh BSN, Tekun, Mara, SME Corp dan Yapin dengan kadar pembiayaan serendah 3%.
All ministers and deputy ministers will not be taking their salaries for 3 months from June as practiced during the First Movement Control Order 1.0 last year. According to Tan Sri Muhyiddin, the salaries would be contributed to the Disaster Trust Fund to finance expenses related to COVID-19.
Inilah antara usaha kerajaan sebagai meneruskan agenda prihatin rakyat dan komitmen Kerajaan Perikatan Nasional dalam menguruskan krisis yang melanda ini. Saya amat menghargai dan berterima kasih kepada semua pihak yang kekal teguh bersama-sama kerajaan tanpa mengira kawan ataupun lawan dalam menghadapi situasi yang tidak pernah kita jangkakan ini.
In this regard, Tan Sri Muhyiddin said the government is also providing various stimulus packages valued at more RM100 billion, which are still being implemented. He said in terms of direct expenditure by the government, RM65 billion have been approved through the COVID-19 fund, with RM38 billion having been spent last year and RM10 billion been channeled up to April, while RM17 billion would be spent soon. The Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency MMEA successfully foiled an attempt to smuggle out 56 kg of shabu and ecstasy worth RM3.33 million, about 3.4 nautical miles southwest of Sungai Kapal Kecil, Pulau Ketam yesterday. Its Deputy Director General of Operations, Rear Admiral Kamruzaman Abu Hassan, said 2 locals, namely a 70-year-old man and his 40-year-old daughter, as well as a 24-year-old Indonesian man, were also arrested. Admiral Kamruzaman said MMEE came across the fiberglass boat with 3 suspects on board during the operation codenamed Op Belangkas in Selangor waters and ordered them to stop. He said one of MMEA personnel got onto the suspect's boat to conduct an inspection, but the senior citizen who was the captain of the boat did not cooperate and began speeding, adding that the boat was eventually intercepted and sank following a collision after the suspect made some dangerous maneuvers.
Hasil pemeriksaan di tempat kejadian telah menemui 4 bunyi yang disyaki mengandungi dadah, dan pihak FMN juga telah mendapati 1 kali OKT warga tempatan telah mengalami kecederaan parah. OKT tersebut telah didapati meninggal dunia setiba di JT Pasukan Polis Marine Pulau Indah. OKT bersama 4 bunyi di dalamnya disyaki dadah telah dibawa ke Maritim Negeri Selangor dan diserahkan kepada Pegawai Penyiasat Maritim Negeri Selangor untuk tindakan lanjut. Kes disiasat di bawah Seksyen 39B Akta Dadah Berbahaya 1952. Jika sabit kesalahan boleh dihukum gantung sampai mati atau penjara seumur hidup.
Admiral Kamruzaman said the team was also led to the suspect's house by his daughter and found 1 kilogram of shabu in her father's room. A drug trafficking syndicate using modified fire extinguishers in refrigerated lorry to smuggle drugs to a neighbouring country has been foiled with the arrest of 9 individuals in separate raids around Johor Bahru. Johor Police Chief Dato' Ayub Khan Maidin Piche said the operation conducted from 1:20 p.m. to 2 p.m. on Sunday involved the arrest of 7 local men, a local woman and an Indonesian man, all aged between 26 and 40. In a statement, Dato' Ayub Khan said police also seized various drugs such as ganja, shabu and heroin, as well as 8 vehicles, cash money and jewellery worth a total of 400,176 ringgit. The modus operandi of the syndicate is smuggle drugs to a neighbouring country, and they were believed to have been operating for about 3 months. The operation involved Bukit Aman Narcotics CID and Johor CID, carried out with the shared information of the Central Narcotics Bureau of Singapore. Dato' Ayub Khan said urine screening found 1 suspect was positive for methamphetamine, while 3 others have passed criminal records. They were remanded for 7 days from today, and the case will be investigated under Section 39B of the Dangerous Drugs Act 1952. Of world citizens, the only way free of pandemic. That and more in our foreign segment.
Ancaman COVID itu benar. Ancaman nyawa juga benar. Kapasiti hospital terhad juga adalah benar.
Duduk dalam rumah masing-masing. Jangan keluar mana-mana kalau tak ada apa-apa benda penting.
Kita harus bertindak dan harus ambil peduli.
Siapa jaga kita? Ini cerita kita bersama saya Nadine Nordin mengupas persoalan ini.
Welcome back. The only hope for the world to end the COVID-19 pandemic is to ensure as many people are vaccinated as rapidly as possible. Hence, Malaysia reiterates its call for universal access to COVID-19 vaccines. Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said vaccine equity is still a major issue and the world cannot win this war against the virus unless everyone has equal and rapid access to vaccines.
These vaccines must be affordable and accessible to all. We joined the COVAX facility to facilitate the equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines globally and commend the WHO for spearheading this effort. I'm delighted to note that Malaysia has started receiving the delivery of the vaccines procured through COVAX. The rollout of the vaccination offers hope for us to win the war on COVID-19. It has already evidently done so much in wealthy countries which have an abundant access to vaccine, but we need all countries to have the same opportunity.
The Premier said this in his address during the closing session of the 74th World Health Assembly held virtually at Geneva, Switzerland last night. He said that Malaysia has successfully inoculated over 5% of its population under Malaysia's national COVID-19 immunization program since late February, adding the pace is very much dependent on the supply and delivery of vaccines from the manufacturers. The Prime Minister said Malaysia requires 53 million doses of vaccines to meet the need of 70% of its population. Until date, the country has only received just under 3.2 million doses, or 6% of the required doses. Malaysia is scaling up vaccinations through the public and private health partnerships, besides implementing many good practices observed from other countries. Meanwhile, World Health Organization members agreed to strengthen the global body at the heart of the pandemic response and give it a more secure financial base from which to future health crises. Many of the details of the concrete measures needed have been left to a future date as members continue to debate how much power to cede to UN body. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus hailed the resolution passed on the last day of the UN Health Agency's annual meeting of its 194 member states as historic, as he said the world needs a stronger WHO at the center of the global health architecture. A year and a half after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed more than 3.5 million people, member states agreed to strengthen the organization at the heart of the global response to the crisis. The 14-page resolution adopted Monday vowed, among other things, to remove the uncertainty around the organization's funding. Member states committed to ensure the adequate, flexible, sustainable and predictable financing of WHO's program budget. Only about 16% of the agency's budget currently comes from regular membership fees, as the rest coming from voluntary contributions, which are heavily earmarked by countries for particular projects. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel said they are expecting the US and Danish governments to present explanations over allegations Washington spied on European allies with Copenhagen's aid. Macron, after a French-German summit meeting held via video conference between Paris and Berlin, said this is not acceptable between allies and even less between allies and European partners. He said he was attached to the bond of trust that unites Europeans and Americans, adding that there is no room for suspicion between allies. Giving her position, Merkel said she could only agree with the comments of the French leader. In an investigative report on Sunday, Danish public broadcaster Denmark Radio, DR, and other European media outlets said the US National Security Agency, NSA, had eavesdropped on Danish underwater internet cables from 2012 to 2014 to spy on top politicians in Germany, Sweden, Norway and France. The NSA was able to access text messages, telephone calls and internet traffic, including searches, chats and messaging services, including those of Merkel, then Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier and then opposition leader Pierre Steinbrück. Merkel said at the summit that she was reassured by statements by the Danish government, especially Defence Minister Trine Bramsen, condemning such action. Authorities have called on the public to help identify gunmen who indiscriminately sprayed bullets into crowds at 2 Miami area venues over the weekend, killing a total of 3 people. 2 people died and over 20 others were wounded early Sunday during shooting outside concert in Miami-Dade County, about a day after a drive-by shooting killed 1 person and injured 6 in Miami's Wynwood Arts District. The shots erupted near a banquet and events hall in a strip mall in Miami Gardens, a heavily Cuban community of working-class families. Yesterday, about a dozen small yellow cones could be seen on the street outside the hall, marking where bullet casings and evidence were found. Miami-Dade Police Department said in a statement the venue was hosting a scheduled event and several patrons were standing outside when an SUV approached the scene. Police said 3 subjects exited the vehicle and began shooting indiscriminately into the crowd before fleeing. According to the police, the suspect's motive is currently unknown. UN Special Envoy to Yemen, Martin Griffiths, reiterated on Monday the importance of reopening Yemen's ports to enable free flow of much-needed humanitarian aid. Griffiths is leading an international effort to secure an end to fighting in Yemen, which has caused what the United Nations consider the world's biggest humanitarian crisis, pushing millions of people to the edge of famine. According to Griffiths, no agreement has been reached despite all the parties agreeing to prioritize Yemen's humanitarian needs. The Houthis' main demand has been the lifting of blockades at the country's main port and the capital's airport, which are both under Houthi control but restricted by the Saudi-led coalition. The Saudis have said reopening air and sea links would have to be accompanied by a ceasefire deal that the Houthis have not accepted. The Houthis, who have controlled most of northern Yemen since 2014, are pressing an offensive to seize Yemen's gas-rich Marib region and have kept up cross-border attacks on Saudi Arabia. The Saudi-led coalition intervened in Yemen in 2015 after the Houthis ousted the Saudi-backed government from the capital, Sana'a. Meanwhile, local Brazilians has expressed outrage after CONMEBOL announced that Brazil will host the Copa America soccer tournament amid a coronavirus pandemic that has left more than 460,000 people dead in the South American country. Despite soccer being a national obsession in Brazil, Brazilians said the country is not ready to host the tournament. The decision is a boost for President Jair Bolsonaro, a far-right former army captain who has rallied against lockdowns and urged Brazilians to return to normal life. More than 460,000 people have died from COVID-19 in Brazil, the second highest number in the world after the United States, and the vaccination rollout has started. Brazil has reported 204 infections per 100,000 people in the last 7 days, compared to 484 per 100,000 in Argentina. Although no decision has yet been made on venues, many of the stadiums Brazil built or reformed for the 2014 World Cup could be candidate to host the matches, with the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro or the Mané Garrincha Stadium in the capital Brasilia possible locations. That concludes today's edition of Updates at Noon. Headlining today's bulletin, another 40 billion ringgit of stimulus announced as total lockdown initiated. Tune in to News at 10 coming up at 10 p.m. on saluran Berita RTM on My Free Views channel 123. You can also stream the news by surfing RTM Clip, web portal and mobile app. Before we go, we would like to wish Selamat Hari Gawai to the Dayak community in Sarawak. I'm Azlani Adani. Stay tuned to TV2. Goodbye for now.